It started with the smell of lavender, a scent I hated but one she adored. It wasn't unusual for Emily to bring home new candles or sprays. Yet this time, the fragrance wasn't in our house. It was on her, a faint, cloying sweetness that clung to her coat when she came back from working late 3 nights in a row. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched. The way her phone seemed permanently glued to her hand, yet always flipped face down when she set it on the counter. How her laugh, louder and more genuine than I'd heard in months, was directed at texts, not at me or the kids. The way she'd slip into our bedroom and emerge 20 minutes later, dressed as if she were auditioning for a role I didn't remember casting. "Big presentation," she said one night, brushing off my raised eyebrow at her red lipstick. "Clients like a polished look, right?" I murmured, barely hiding my skepticism. Her company sold software. Polished or not, no one was judging lipstick through a conference call. But the real warning sign came on a Saturday morning when Emily walked into the kitchen with an oversized sweater that wasn't hers. "New?" I asked, gesturing to the unfamiliar garment. "It's old," she snapped, her tone too sharp for such a casual question. "You just never notice anything." That line? That was her go-to weapon when she needed to throw me off balance. The problem was, I'd started noticing everything. Her sudden affection for lavender wasn't the only thing. She began to dodge simple questions. Her energy shifted, like she was an actress juggling 2 different scripts and struggling to keep her lines straight. I knew there was something rotten beneath the surface, but I couldn't prove it. Yet, Sunday morning was the turning point. Emily claimed she was meeting her sister for brunch. I didn't buy it. Her sister had been out of town for weeks. Emily had even complained about it just days earlier. "Which place are you meeting her at?" I asked casually, pretending to scroll on my phone. "The Green Fig," she replied without missing a beat, rattling off the name of a trendy cafe. I smiled to myself. She didn't know that I'd already called the Green Fig that morning. No reservations under her name or her sister's. So I followed her. It wasn't hard. She wasn't expecting it. Her car led me to a hotel just outside of town. Not the swanky kind you'd book for a romantic getaway, but the cheap, forgettable kind where people check in under fake names. My stomach clenched as I watched her park, exit her car, and walk inside like she owned the place. No hesitation. No glancing over her shoulder. I waited for 20 minutes, debating whether I had the stomach to go in. Finally, I did. The man at the front desk barely looked up when I entered. His indifference worked in my favor as I casually scanned the small lobby. It wasn't until I spotted the familiar lavender scarf hanging off the back of a chair near the vending machines that the blood drained from my face. I didn't need to see more. When I got home, I didn't cry or yell. I didn't even drink, though I wanted to. Instead, I calmly packed a bag for myself and one for each of the kids. I didn't bother folding her laundry or cleaning the dishes she'd left in the sink. I didn't even leave a note. By the time she walked through the door the next morning, looking smug and smelling of lavender, we were already gone. The kids and I were settled at my brother Mike's place by the time Emily realized we were gone. I had no plans to explain myself yet. Mike wasn't thrilled about the sudden intrusion, but the moment he saw my face, his usual sarcasm took a back seat. "You good?" he asked, handing me a beer as the kids disappeared into the living room with his old Xbox. "No," I replied flatly, "but I will be." My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Her name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a second, then let it go to voicemail. She called again, and again. By the 5th time, Mike raised an eyebrow. "You're gonna answer that?" "Not yet," I said, sipping the beer. Instead, I waited. I wanted her to stew in confusion, to feel the same knot of unease I'd been carrying for weeks. When her texts started rolling in, they went from mildly concerned to furious in record time. "Dave, where are you? Where are the kids? This isn't funny. Answer me." I still said nothing. An hour later, my phone rang again, but this time it wasn't her. It was a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Dave." Emily's voice came through, shrill and frantic. "What the hell is going on? Where are you? Why aren't you answering your phone?" "New number already?" I asked coolly. "Didn't think you'd go nuclear this fast." "Don't play games with me," she snapped. "Where are my kids?" Her kids. The words stung, but I kept my tone steady. They're fine. They're with me. She let out a sharp breath, somewhere between relief and irritation. You can't just take off like that. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? I laughed bitterly. Are you serious right now? I have no idea what you're talking about, she said, her voice laced with faux innocence. You're acting like a lunatic. Did something happen at work? Are you stressed? Cut the crap, Emily, I said, my voice rising. I saw you at the hotel. There was a pause, just long enough for her carefully constructed mask to crack. What the hell were you doing following me? She finally spat, her voice shifting to anger. Not the reaction of someone who has nothing to hide. I shot back. Her silence was deafening. I packed up and left because I'm done playing the idiot in your little soap opera. I continued. I don't know who he is and I don't care. But you're not going to lie to my face and pretend everything's fine. You're overreacting, she said, her tone suddenly dismissive, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. It's not what you think. That hotel was for a client meeting. Business, Dave. But of course, you're so insecure you can't even trust me. Insecure? I barked out a humorless laugh. Lavender perfume, hotel rooms, disappearing for hours, and you think this is about my insecurity? I don't have time for this, she snapped. Bring the kids home, or I'm calling the police. Go ahead, I said, my voice ice cold. Tell them you abandoned your family for a business meeting. See how that plays out. She hung up on me, and I stared at the phone in my hand, the silence somehow louder than her words. For the first time, I wasn't the one scrambling for answers. She was, and I wasn't done making her squirm. The silence after Emily hung up didn't last long. Less than an hour later, there was a knock at Mike's door. Not a polite, tentative tap, but a sharp, relentless pounding that echoed through the house. Want me to handle this? Mike asked, standing and cracking his knuckles. No, I said, though the tension in my chest felt like a coiled spring ready to snap. I made my way to the door and opened it. There she was, Emily, standing on the porch, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her face was flushed, not with worry, but with fury. You've lost your damn mind, she said before I could get a word out. She pushed past me into the house, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on the kids. Mommy, our youngest called, running toward her. She knelt down, plastering on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hi, baby. Mommy missed you so much. The act was nauseating. She was all sugar and sunshine for the kids, but as soon as they were distracted by the Xbox again, her head snapped toward me, and the mask fell away. We're going home. Now, she hissed. Not happening, I said, crossing my arms. You can drop the show, Emily. This isn't your stage anymore. She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. You're seriously doing this in front of the kids? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? I said, incredulous. That's rich coming from someone sneaking around hotels and lying through her teeth. Her eyes darted to Mike, who was leaning casually against the wall, watching the exchange like it was a Netflix drama. Do you mind giving us some privacy? She snapped. I actually do, Mike said, not moving an inch. This is my house, after all, and I'm not about to let you spin whatever fairy tale you've cooked up. She glared at him, then turned back to me. You're being paranoid, she said, her voice adopting a softer, condescending tone. You're stressed, Dave. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearer than I have in months. I shot back. And I'm done playing dumb. You want to talk about being stressed? Let's talk about what you've been doing behind my back. Emily's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. You really think I'd throw away 10 years of marriage and 2 kids for what? A fling? Is that what you're accusing me of? I don't need to accuse you, I said, my voice rising. I saw you, Emily, at the hotel. I know. The air between us crackled with tension. For a split second, I thought she might confess, might finally drop the charade and tell the truth. But instead, she laughed. Not a nervous, guilty laugh, but a cruel, mocking one that sent a chill down my spine. You're pathetic, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. You think spying on me and throwing this little tantrum makes you the hero? Grow up, Dave. Mike straightened, taking a step forward. Careful, he warned, his voice low, but I didn't need him to defend me. Something about her words, her smugness, her absolute lack of remorse, lit a fire in me I didn't even know I had. Get out, I said, my voice steady and unyielding. Her eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? You heard me. You're not taking the kids, and you're not staying here. Go back to your hotel or wherever the hell you've been sneaking off to. But you're not welcome here. For the first time, she hesitated. Her confidence wavered, just for a moment, as she realized she'd lost control of the narrative. This isn't over, she said finally, her voice a low growl. No, I said, meeting her gaze. It's not, but it's on my terms now. Without another word, she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Mike let out a low whistle. Damn, man, I didn't know you had that in you. Neither did I. But standing there, watching her tail lights disappear down the street, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Emily tried every tactic in the book to regain control. Calls, texts, emails. It was like she had an internal manual for manipulation, flipping between concerned wife, wronged victim, and ruthless negotiator, depending on the time of day. But I was done playing her game. I started digging. It wasn't hard, really. Emily always underestimated me. She assumed I'd be too shattered or distracted to look deeper. But as it turns out, a decade of shared bank accounts, phone bills, and social media leaves a trail even the cleverest liar can't completely erase. The first crack came from her credit card statement. 2 charges stood out like neon signs. One for the hotel I'd followed her to, and another at a high-end jewelry store 2 towns over. The date of the jewelry purchase? The same day she claimed to be at a company retreat. I couldn't decide which was worse, the lies or the fact that she thought I wouldn't notice. Next, I checked her phone records. I had to call in a favor from a buddy of mine who works in IT. But it was worth it. One number popped up over and over, logged under the innocuous name, Clara Work. Emily doesn't work with anyone named Clara. I stared at the number for a long time before deciding to call it. Hello? A man's voice answered, deep, smooth, and entirely unfamiliar. I didn't say anything at first, letting the silence stretch. Emily? He asked, his tone shifting to concern. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. That night, as I was stewing over everything I'd uncovered, Mike walked in with 2 beers and a knowing look. How bad is it? He asked, setting one in front of me. Worse than I thought, I said, filling him in on what I'd found. He let out a low whistle. What's your move? I'm not sure yet, I admitted, but I'm not letting her skate by with this. Just as the words left my mouth, my phone buzzed. Emily again. I almost ignored it, but something in me wanted to see how far she'd go. I answered. What do you want? I asked, skipping any pleasantries. To talk, she said, her voice dripping with feigned sincerity. Dave, please, for the kids. You had plenty of chances to talk, I said coldly. Now you want to play the doting mother? Spare me. There was a long pause, and then her tone shifted sharp, cutting like a knife to the gut. Fine, she snapped. If you want to play dirty, so can I. You're not the perfect husband you think you are, Dave. Maybe you should remember that before dragging me through the mud. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, though I could already feel her trap setting. You don't think I know about your late nights? Your work trips? She said, her voice dripping with venom. You think you're so squeaky clean? I almost laughed. Her attempt to gaslight me was so transparent it was almost pathetic. Nice try, Emily, I said. But we both know who's been sneaking around. You're not flipping this on me. You'll regret this, she said, her voice low and threatening. No, Emily, I said, hanging up. You will. As I set the phone down, Mike raised an eyebrow. She just threatened you? Yep, I said, my jaw tightening. Then I'd say it's time to hit her where it hurts. Mike's words echoed in my head as I sat down with my laptop, determined to uncover every last one of Emily's secrets. If she wanted to play dirty, she'd soon learn I wasn't afraid to get my hands in the mud, because now it wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about showing her, and anyone else watching, that I wasn't the fool she thought I was. If Emily thought her vague threats would scare me off, she was sorely mistaken. That night, while the kids were asleep and Mike was engrossed in some action movie in the living room, I dug deeper. First, I tried the number again, the one saved as Clara Work. This time I had a plan. When the man picked up and said hello, I didn't hesitate. "Hi, this is Dave," I said, keeping my voice calm and measured. "I'm Emily's husband." The pause on the other end was brief but telling. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice losing its earlier confidence. "Answers," I said bluntly. "Who are you? And what's your connection to my wife?" "That's none of your business," he replied, but there was an edge of panic in his tone. "Oh, but it is," I said, leaning into the tension. "See, she's been lying to both of us, hasn't she? You think she's yours? Let me guess. She's told you I'm the bad guy, that we're separated, that I'm some distant, uninvolved father. Am I close?" The man didn't respond, but I heard him exhale sharply, like I just punched him in the gut. "I thought so," I said. "Here's a tip. If she's lying to me, she's lying to you too." Before he could reply, I hung up. I wasn't interested in his excuses or sob story. The next step was confronting the evidence I hadn't wanted to face. The jewelry store. I drove there the following morning, parking a few blocks away to avoid being seen. Inside, the clerk, a middle-aged woman with a friendly smile, greeted me warmly. "Looking for something special?" she asked. "Actually, I have a question," I said, pulling out Emily's credit card statement. "This purchase, do you remember who made it?" Her smile faltered. "I'm not sure I can. It's my wife's card," I interrupted, my tone firm. "I'm just trying to understand why she was here. Please." The woman hesitated, then nodded. "She came in with a man," she said, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Tall, dark hair, very charming. They picked out a bracelet together. He paid cash for part of it, but the rest went on her card." The room spun for a moment. A bracelet. She'd been buying jewelry with him while I was at home making macaroni and cheese for our kids. "Do you remember what kind of bracelet?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "It was gold," she said, gesturing to her wrist. "Very elegant." She seemed happy. Happy. The word cut deeper than I expected. "Thanks," I said, forcing a tight smile as I turned to leave. Driving back to Mike's house, I felt a storm brewing inside me. The pieces were falling into place, each one sharper and more painful than the last. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was building an entirely separate life, one filled with hotel rooms, jewelry, and a man who clearly thought he'd won some kind of prize. When I walked into the house, Mike was waiting for me at the kitchen table, a grim look on his face. "Well?" he asked. "She bought a bracelet," I said, dropping into a chair. "With him." Mike let out a low whistle. "Damn. What are you gonna do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'm not letting her get away with this." As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. It was Emily, of course, but this time, she'd sent a photo. A picture of her holding the bracelet, her hand resting on the steering wheel of her car. "Still think you know everything?" the caption read. I stared at the screen, my anger simmering just below the surface. "Show her you're not playing games," Mike said, his voice calm but firm. I nodded, a plan already forming in my mind. If Emily wanted to provoke me, she was about to find out exactly what happens when you push someone too far. Emily's text was meant to rattle me. It was her way of saying, I'm still in control. But what she didn't realize was that I'd moved beyond anger. I wasn't reacting to her games anymore. I was preparing for the endgame. "Let her think she's winning," Mike said, nodding at the bracelet photo. "People like her always overplay their hand." He was right. Emily thrived on power and control. Her arrogance blinded her to the cracks forming in her carefully constructed facade. That evening, I called my lawyer. Her name was Linda, a no-nonsense woman who'd handled a friend's divorce last year. She was known for two things: her efficiency and her ability to dismantle deceitful spouses in court. "Tell me everything," Linda said as soon as I sat in her office the next morning. And I did. From the hotel to the bracelet to the fake Clara Work number, I laid it all out. "She's not just cheating," I said. my voice steady despite the storm inside me. She's living a double life, and I want it exposed. Linda nodded, her pen flying across a notepad. Do you have proof? I handed over screenshots of the credit card statement, the phone logs, and the photo of her smugly showing off the bracelet. This is a good start, she said. But if we're going to hit her where it hurts, we'll need more. Financials, witnesses, anything that shows she's been lying about her commitments to you and the kids. Consider it done, I said, already planning my next steps. Later that day, I returned to Mike's place, where he had news of his own. You're not going to believe this, he said, holding up his phone. Remember that number you called? The guy she's been talking to? Yeah, I said, my fists clenching at the memory of his voice. Well, turns out he's married too. What? Mike grinned, clearly enjoying the twist. I did a little digging. His name's Ryan, and he's got a wife and 2 kids. Lives about 20 minutes from here. My mind reeled. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was tangled in a web of lies so complicated. It was a miracle she hadn't tripped over it sooner. This changes everything, I said, the pieces falling into place. If Ryan's wife didn't know about the affair, she deserved to. And if she did, she might be the ally I needed to take Emily down. That evening, I parked outside Ryan's house, my heart pounding. His wife answered the door. Blonde, mid-30s, and holding a toddler on her hip. Can I help you? She asked, her tone polite but wary. My name's Dave, I said, my voice calm but firm. I think your husband is having an affair with my wife. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. What? I know this is a lot to process, I said quickly, not wanting to overwhelm her. But I have proof. If you want to talk, I'll show you everything. She hesitated, glancing back toward the house, then stepped outside, closing the door behind her. Show me, she said. I pulled out my phone and showed her the texts, the phone logs, and the photo of the bracelet. She stared at the screen, her hands trembling. It's Emily, isn't it? She whispered. You know her? I asked, surprised. She's been a friend of Ryan's for a while now, she said bitterly. I had my suspicions, but this confirms it. We talked for over an hour, trading stories and piecing together the timeline of their affair. By the end of it, she was as determined as I was to confront them. I'll handle Ryan, she said, her voice steely. But if you're taking Emily down, count me in. The plan was set. Emily and Ryan had underestimated both of us. They thought they were untouchable, that their secrets would stay buried. But their house of cards was about to come crashing down. The day of the confrontation, my nerves were a live wire. Ryan's wife, Danielle, had agreed to meet me at a small cafe to finalize our plan. She arrived on time, her expression a mix of anger and determination. Ready? She asked as she slid into the booth across from me. More than ready, I replied. Danielle had taken it upon herself to gather evidence against Ryan in the few days since I'd first shown up at her door. Bank statements, suspicious receipts, and photos from a shared cloud account. It was all there, damning and indisputable. Between the 2 of us, we had enough proof to bury them both. Our plan was simple. Hit them where they least expected it. Emily had been hounding me for days, demanding a sit-down for the sake of the kids. I'd agreed to meet her at a neutral spot, a quiet park she liked, while Danielle had arranged a similar meeting with Ryan at the same location, under the pretense of working things out. We arrived separately, Danielle parking her car a block away while I pulled into the lot. Emily was already there, leaning against a bench, her phone in hand. Dave, she said as I approached, her voice dripping with faux concern. Finally, can we talk like adults for once? Sure, I said, keeping my tone even. Let's talk. Before she could respond, Danielle appeared, walking briskly toward us with Ryan in tow. His face was a mixture of confusion and irritation. Clearly, he hadn't been told the full story. What the hell is this? Emily snapped, her eyes darting between me and Danielle. This, I said, gesturing toward Danielle, is the other person you've been lying to, and he, I pointed at Ryan, is the man you've been sneaking around with. Emily's face drained of color. You've got to be kidding me. Danielle stepped forward, her voice icy. Oh, we're not kidding. We know everything, Emily. The hotels, the bracelet, the late-night calls. You thought you could keep this up forever. Ryan looked like a deer in headlights. Danielle, this isn't what you think. Shut up, Danielle snapped, her voice slicing through the air. You don't get to talk. Emily, realizing the walls were closing in, switched tactics. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice rising. Dave, you're seriously dragging strangers into our personal business? And you, she turned to Danielle, need to get a grip. Whatever your husband is doing has nothing to do with me. Really? Danielle said, pulling out her phone. Because this looks like your hand holding the bracelet. She shoved the photo in Emily's face. Emily faltered, her mask slipping for the briefest moment before she regained her composure. You're all insane, she said, her voice trembling. I don't owe any of you an explanation. No, I said, stepping closer, my voice calm but firm. But you owe me 10 years of my life back. And you owe our kids the truth. Her face twisted in anger. Don't you dare bring the kids into this. Oh, I'm bringing them in, I said. Because while you were out playing house with him, I pointed at Ryan. I was at home, cleaning up your messes and making excuses for why mommy wasn't around. Ryan, sensing the heat was shifting toward him, tried to intervene. This is getting out of hand, he said, his voice shaky. We should all just... Danielle cut him off with a laugh, bitter and sharp. Out of hand? You've been sneaking around with her for months, lying to my face, and now you want to play peacemaker? Spare me. Emily turned to me, her expression hardening. What do you want, Dave? Huh? You want me to grovel? Cry? Say I'm sorry? Fine. I'm sorry. There. Happy now. No, I said, meeting her gaze. I don't want an apology. I want accountability. And trust me, Emily, you're going to get it, whether you like it or not. The air was thick with tension as Danielle and I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, exposed and defenseless. It wasn't the end, not by a long shot. But it was the first crack in their carefully constructed facade, and I knew it wouldn't take much more to make it shatter completely. Emily didn't call after the confrontation in the park. For the first time in weeks, her silence felt like a victory. I knew she was reeling, scrambling to regain control. Ryan, too, had gone radio silent, probably busy trying to manage Danielle's wrath. But silence didn't mean peace. I could feel the storm brewing, and I was ready for it. Danielle and I spent the next few days strategizing. Her determination was a force of nature. She'd already filed for divorce, citing infidelity and emotional cruelty, and her lawyer was preparing to drag Ryan through the mud. Meanwhile, Linda and I were gathering every shred of evidence we could find to protect my kids and secure my position in court. Then Emily made her move. It started with a letter, delivered by courier to Mike's house. The envelope was thick, the paper expensive. Inside was a notice from her lawyer, a formal request for mediation, along with a laundry list of demands, joint custody of the kids, half of our savings, and even a claim to Mike's property, citing that it had been used as a marital refuge. Are you kidding me? Mike exploded, slamming the letter on the kitchen counter. She wants my house? She's out of her damn mind. It's a scare tactic, Linda said when I showed her the letter. She's hoping you'll panic and agree to her terms. Don't. We've got her cornered, and she knows it. But Emily wasn't done. The next day, she showed up at Mike's house unannounced, banging on the door like she owned the place. Mike opened it, standing his ground. You've got some nerve showing up here. Where's Dave? She snapped, pushing past him into the house. I walked into the room, my face a mask of calm despite the fire burning in my chest. Emily, what do you want? You think you can just throw me under the bus and walk away clean? She hissed, her voice low and venomous. You've turned this into a circus, Dave. For what? Your pride. For the truth, I said evenly. Something you wouldn't recognize if it slapped you in the face. Her eyes blazed, but I could see the cracks in her armor. She was unraveling, and I wasn't about to let her pull me down with her. This isn't over, she said, jabbing a finger in my direction. You can play the victim all you want, but don't forget. I know you. I know every mistake, every weakness. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. Her words were meant to intimidate, but they only strengthened my resolve. "Get out," Mike said, stepping between us. "Before I call the cops." She glared at him, then at me before storming out. The sound of her car screeching down the street was almost satisfying. Linda called later that evening with good news. "We've got her," she said, her voice triumphant. "The financials, the phone records, the photos, there's no way she can spin this in court. And with Danielle testifying, we'll have a rock-solid case." Hearing that felt like a weight lifting off my chest. Emily had underestimated me, just as she'd underestimated Danielle. She thought her lies and manipulation would shield her forever, but the walls were closing in. The best part? I wasn't even finished. As I sat down that night to draft a statement for the court, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in months, the power was in my hands, and I was going to use it to dismantle every last piece of her facade. Emily thought she could play games with my life, but she'd forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't the same man she'd been lying to for years. This time, I was ready. The day of mediation arrived faster than I expected, and Emily walked into the room like a queen preparing for her coronation. Dressed in a sleek black suit and armed with her high-priced attorney, she exuded a smugness that only fueled my determination. She barely looked at me as she took her seat across the table, her eyes fixed on the mediator, a calm woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Ms. Howell. "Shall we begin?" Ms. Howell asked, her tone neutral as she gestured for both sides to state their positions. Emily's lawyer, a polished man with salt and pepper hair, leaned forward. "My client seeks an amicable resolution that ensures the well-being of the children while maintaining fairness in the division of assets." Translation: Emily wanted the house, the money, and a significant chunk of my time with the kids. Linda didn't flinch. "My client has evidence that Mrs. Roberts has engaged in behavior detrimental to the marriage, including infidelity and financial misconduct," she said smoothly, sliding a folder across the table. The lawyer's smug expression faltered as he opened the folder. Inside was everything: photos, texts, phone logs, and a notarized statement from Danielle confirming the affair. "This is ridiculous," Emily snapped, her composure cracking. "None of that has anything to do with custody or the divorce settlement." "Oh, but it does," Linda countered. "Your actions demonstrate a pattern of deceit and irresponsibility, which directly impacts your fitness as a parent." Emily's eyes narrowed, but before she could retort, Linda pulled out her ace. "And then there's this," she said, sliding a second folder across the table. The lawyer hesitated before opening it, his face going pale as he read the contents. Inside were bank statements showing unexplained withdrawals, charges to private accounts, and a suspicious $5,000 transfer to an account in Ryan's name. Emily's face twisted in fury. "What the hell is this, Dave?" "Your financial trail," I said evenly. "You've been funding your little side project with our savings. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering furiously, but Emily wasn't listening. Her eyes were locked on me, blazing with hatred. "This is a setup," she spat. "You're trying to ruin me." "No," I said calmly. "You did that all on your own. I'm just making sure the truth comes out." Ms. Howell cleared her throat, her expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Roberts, do you have anything to say in response to these claims?" Emily's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Her lawyer, sensing the battle was lost, asked for a recess. As they left the room, Linda turned to me with a satisfied smile. "That went better than expected." "She's going to come back swinging," I said, though I couldn't deny the sense of victory bubbling beneath my exhaustion. "She can try," Linda replied, "but we've got her backed into a corner. The judge will see right through her." After the recess, Emily returned, her demeanor colder and more calculated. Her lawyer spoke first, proposing a watered-down settlement that would give her limited visitation rights and a small portion of the savings. "We're willing to concede on these terms to avoid further conflict," he said. Linda smirked. "That's generous, but my client is prepared to take this to court if necessary. And given the evidence, I don't think Mrs. Roberts would want that." Emily shot daggers at me with her eyes, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground, unshaken by her manipulation. In the end, the mediator sided with me. I retained full custody of the kids, the house, and the majority of our savings. Emily was granted visitation under strict conditions, her financial claims dismissed due to her misuse of funds. When it was over, she stood outside the building, waiting as I walked to my car. "You think you've won?" she hissed as I passed her. "No," I said, turning to meet her gaze. "The kids won, and I'm making sure they never have to lose again." Her face twisted in fury, but she didn't say another word as I drove away. For the first time, I felt free. Emily's lies, her games, her control, they were finally over. Now it was just me and the kids starting fresh. And for the first time in years, I felt like we had a real chance at happiness. The weeks following the mediation felt like stepping into sunlight after a storm. The weight of Emily's deceit was still there, lingering like a shadow, but it no longer defined my every waking moment. The kids adjusted quickly, which surprised me. They were resilient, bouncing back faster than I expected. I kept our days full, trips to the park, game nights, and lazy Sunday mornings making pancakes. For the first time in years, the house felt like a home instead of a battleground. Emily, however, wasn't about to let go so easily. Her first move came a week after the mediation. I received a text from an unknown number late at night. "You'll regret this." I didn't need to ask who it was. Emily's style was as predictable as it was infuriating. I ignored the message, but I could feel her scheming in the background, looking for cracks in the foundation she could exploit. A few days later, Mike called me from work. "Dude, did you see her post?" "What post?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "She's gone full scorched earth," Mike said, sending me a link. Emily had taken to social media with a lengthy, dramatic post painting herself as the victim. In her version, I was a controlling husband who had blindsided her with divorce and manipulated the courts to keep her from the kids. "She's trying to rewrite history," Mike said, disgusted. "Let her," I replied. "Anyone who believes her isn't someone I need in my life anyway." Despite my outward calm, the post stung. She was attacking me publicly, weaponizing half-truths and outright lies to save face. But deep down, I knew it was her way of grasping for control, her last desperate attempt to stay relevant in a story she no longer controlled. The turning point came when Danielle called. "Ryan moved out," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "I kicked him to the curb last night." "Good for you," I said. "You deserve better." "Thanks," she said, then hesitated. "There's something you should know." "What is it?" "Emily's been reaching out to Ryan," Danielle said. "Trying to, rope him back in." He showed me the messages. "She's blaming you for everything, saying you ruined her life." I laughed bitterly. "That sounds about right. Did he take the bait?" "No," Danielle said. For once, he grew a spine. He told her to leave him alone and blocked her. The image of Emily grasping at straws, only to be rejected by her co-conspirator, brought a grim sense of satisfaction. But I wasn't naive. I knew Emily wasn't done. Her next move came when she showed up unannounced at the kids' school during pickup. I arrived to find her standing by the playground, talking to them like nothing had happened. "Mommy!" our youngest shouted, running toward her. I tensed, but kept my cool. "Emily," I said, approaching her. "You're not supposed to be here." "I just wanted to see them," she said, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. "You have scheduled visitation," I replied evenly. "You know the rules." Her eyes flashed with anger, but she forced a smile. "Don't be like this, Dave. The kids need their mother. They also need stability," I said, lowering my voice so the kids couldn't hear. "And showing up unannounced isn't helping." Emily opened her mouth to argue, but the arrival of a teacher cut her short. "Is everything okay here?" the teacher asked, her tone polite but firm. "Yes," I said quickly. "We were just leaving." Emily glared at me but didn't push further. As she walked away, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. The woman I'd once loved was now a stranger, a toxic presence I had to shield my kids from. That night, I filed a report with my lawyer, ensuring Emily's breach of the visitation agreement was documented. Linda assured me that this, combined with her erratic behavior, would only strengthen my case if she tried to contest custody again. And for the first time, I started to feel like this chapter was truly closing. Emily's chaos would never fully disappear, but I was learning how to weather it, how to protect myself and the kids without letting her drag us back into the storm. We were finally moving forward, and no matter what she tried next, I knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't win. Weeks passed, and the dust seemed to settle. Emily's attempts to disrupt my life became less frequent, though the occasional cryptic text or veiled insult still made its way to my phone. I ignored them. She thrived on attention, and denying her that felt like the ultimate revenge. The kids adjusted remarkably well to our new routine. They asked about their mom occasionally, but I kept my answers neutral and reassuring. She loves you, I'd say, leaving it at that. They didn't need to know the details, at least not yet. Then came the email. It landed in my inbox on a Monday morning, disguised as a work-related message. The subject line was vague. Important documents, urgent. It was only when I opened it and saw the attachment labeled custody appeal that my heart sank. Emily was coming for the kids. I forwarded the email to Linda immediately, calling her to make sure she'd seen it. She's filing for joint custody again, Linda said, her tone sharp. But this time she's claiming alienation, that you're turning the kids against her. That's insane, I said, pacing the kitchen. I've done everything I can to keep them out of this mess. She's desperate, Linda said, and desperation makes people dangerous. But don't worry. We've got everything we need to shut this down. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. I spent every day preparing, reviewing evidence, and rehearsing answers to potential questions. Danielle, true to her word, agreed to testify, providing a detailed account of Emily's relationship with Ryan and the emotional fallout it had caused. The day of the hearing, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Emily sat across from me, dressed to impress in a tailored blazer, her expression carefully neutral. Her lawyer, clearly more invested in appearances than substance, shuffled through his notes with the confidence of someone used to winning. But Linda was ready. The proceedings began with Emily's lawyer painting her as a loving, devoted mother who had been unfairly cut out of her children's lives. He cited my refusal to allow unscheduled visits and claimed I was poisoning the well by vilifying her in front of the kids. I kept my face neutral, but inside, I was seething. When it was our turn, Linda calmly dismantled their argument piece by piece. She presented evidence of Emily's erratic behavior, financial mismanagement, and disregard for court orders. She read aloud the text messages Emily had sent me, including the thinly veiled threats and accusations. Then Danielle took the stand. Her testimony was devastating. She spoke about Emily's affair with Ryan, the financial entanglements, and the lies that had unraveled both of their families. She described Emily's attempts to manipulate Ryan even after the affair was exposed, painting a clear picture of someone unfit to prioritize her children's needs. Emily's composure faltered for the first time. Her lawyer objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. When the judge finally delivered her ruling, the courtroom fell silent. The evidence presented demonstrates a pattern of behavior that is inconsistent with the best interests of the children, the judge said, her voice firm but measured. Mr. Roberts will retain full custody. Mrs. Roberts will continue to have supervised visitation as previously ordered, pending a review in 6 months. Emily's face was a mask of fury and disbelief. She opened her mouth to argue, but her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, silently urging her to stop. As I walked out of the courtroom, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. Danielle caught up with me in the hallway, her expression triumphant. "You did it," she said. "We did it," I corrected. Emily glared at me from across the room but said nothing. For once, her silence felt like a victory. Driving home, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the kids, who were chattering about school and oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't in a long time, hope. Emily's storm was still out there, but for now, the skies were clear, and I was determined to protect the calm we'd fought so hard to achieve. The first morning after the court's decision felt surreal. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the uneasy silence I'd come to associate with Emily's looming presence. It was peaceful, the kind of silence that let you hear your own thoughts without dread. The kids were the first to wake, tumbling into the kitchen with the boundless energy only children seem to have before coffee kicks in. "Dad, can we have pancakes?" our youngest asked, her smile wide and bright. "Pancakes it is," I said, grinning as I grabbed the flour. For once, I wasn't distracted by worries of Emily's next move or the fallout of her manipulations. I wasn't rehearsing rebuttals or preparing for another confrontation. I was just there, present with my kids, flipping pancakes and laughing at their silly jokes. Later that day, I sat down with them in the living room. It was time to have a conversation, one I'd been avoiding until the chaos settled. "I want to talk to you about your mom," I began, keeping my tone gentle. Their chatter died down, and they looked at me with curious eyes. "You know how sometimes adults don't always get along?" I asked. They nodded slowly. "Well, your mom and I had some problems, and that's why we're living apart now. But I want you to know that it's not your fault. None of it is." "Does Mom hate us?" my oldest asked quietly, his eyes brimming with worry. My heart ached at the question. "No, buddy," I said, pulling him into a hug. "Your mom loves you very much. She's just going through some things, and we're figuring out how to make sure you're happy and safe. That's what matters most." They seemed to accept the explanation, and I promised to always tell them the truth, as long as it was something they were ready to hear. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat outside on the porch with Mike. He handed me a beer without a word, and we sat there in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. "You did good," he said finally. "Thanks," I replied. "But it's not over." "It never is," he said with a shrug. "But you're handling it." And I was. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't just reacting, I was living. Emily's chaos still hovered at the edges of our lives. She tried to text me again that week, alternating between tearful apologies and bitter insults. I didn't respond. My focus was on the kids, on building something stable and strong for them. Over time, the tension eased. The kids started talking less about Emily and more about their new friends, school projects, and the dog I'd finally agreed to adopt. A floppy-eared mutt they named Max, who immediately became the heart of the house. Danielle stayed in touch, mostly to share updates on Ryan, who was apparently trying to find himself in another state. Her life was moving forward too, and every conversation with her reminded me how far we'd both come. One night, as I was tucking the kids into bed, my youngest looked up at me and said, "I like it here. It feels happy." Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning, and for a moment, I had to swallow the lump in my throat. "Me too, kiddo," I said, kissing her forehead. "Me too." The road ahead wasn't perfect, it never is. But for the first time, I wasn't walking it alone. I had my kids, my family, and a sense of clarity that Emily could never take away. This was our life now, and it was ours to build one day at a time.